Hello, hi, I'm Punita here from Huawei Global Training Center, and today we're going to discuss about the content eNodeB Transport Data Part 8. So let's look into transport and application layer configuration. So this is divided into link mode and endpoint mode. So basically on the transmission layer, for the link mode, we have STP link. So this is related to the control plane signaling command. So when we have STP link, we have to bind it with the CP bearer. So basically they are related to the control plane. And IP path here is related to the user plane command. So this is a link mode whereby the signal and service, they will be going through the same pipe, and usually they will go through the same link. Otherwise, on the endpoint mode, we have a separate concept. So basically, endpoint group, STP template, STP host, and the binding to the endpoint group peers and STP endpoint group, all of them belongs to the control plane. So this is control plane. So STP host will be your eNodeB local IP, and STP peer belongs to MME IP, and we have to bind them with endpoint group. Endpoint group is to bind the host and the peer. So on the other hand, user plane host belongs to the eNodeB IP. In some cases, the signal IP will be different, service IP will be different. Why we make it like this? One thing is that we have two different modules, devices to connect. Example, the signaling goes through MME and the service goes through serving gateway. So they are not the same. So we have to separate the link. So it's easier to monitor and easier to maintain them. So user plane host belongs to eNodeB IP, the logical IP. User plane peer belongs to S gateway IP. So in this case, they have to do the binding also for the endpoint group. So these are the commands and differences between link mode and endpoint mode. Next, we move to the interface information. So at the end, after we configure the transmission layer, we have to configure the interface information. For the link mode, we need to add S1 interface towards the MME, X2 interface towards the eNodeB, and add the eNodeB path. So this one is for the user plane. And for the endpoint mode, we just need to add S1 and X2. And last but not least, we need to add the remote maintenance link OM channel for the transport layer. So these are the basic difference between the link mode and endpoint mode from transmission layer towards the interface information and OM channel. So let's look into one by one. So for the link mode, we have to configure a control plane link. So what are the parameters needed? So add STP link. So link number is important. Then we will add the first local IP. So this one is the eNodeB IP. We have the port number. Peer IP address is referring to the MME IP and its port number. So basically these parameters will be specified by adding STP template, the one that is highlighted. So they are used to establish a control plane link in the endpoint mode. So this one is actually for the endpoint mode, for this section that they have highlighted. So this one will be most suitable for the endpoint mode. So let's look into this command. So we're going to list STP link. So from here, we will be able to see the information of the STP link. Link number 10. Link number 0. Cabinet is referring to the UMPT card. And this is a manual mode. Manual mode means we configure by ourselves. Local IP, not by the system. Auto mode means it's by the system, and you add a new cell, automatically the signaling will be up. So local IP, then we have the local port number. So this is the eNodeB IP. And this one is the MME IP, peer IP, and they have their own port number. So this is the STP link information. So next we go into the CP bearer. So only one CP bearer can be carried on each SCTP link. So when you add one SCTP link, you must add one CP bearer. SCTP link for carrying the CP bearer must have been configured. So this is a mandatory command. So let's look into the command. So list CP bearer. So when we add one SCTP link, the CP bearer must be linked to the same link number. This is the SCTP link number. We bind to the CP bearer. So bearer type is SCTP link. So when you add the SCTP link command, you will see all this information. So we may need to add the link number, first local IP, local SCTP port number, first peer IP, and peer SCTP port number. Next, for user plane. So to configure the user plane, we need to add IP path. So we need to add the path number. Slot number is referring to the UMPT card. So port number, and we will have the local IP and the peer IP, and the path type should be any QoS. Because if you put any QoS, this path can be used to carry services of any QoS. So it will carry service without a specified DSCP. So that's different. So let's look into this command, IP path. So list IP path. So this is the configuration for list IP path. So basically we have configured path ID 0. This is an old configuration model. So this is the port information, and the path type is any QoS. So it can carry any services without a DSCP. And next, we go into the interface information. We need to add the S1 and X2 interface. So there are two commands here. In S1 interface, we have to bind. This one is unique. S1 interface ID is unique. CP bearer ID we have configured earlier. So we have to add it and bind it with the CN operator. And MME release is also important. So we have to make sure we use the correct MME. And for X2 interface, we are adding the ID and binding it to the X2 CP bearer ID. This is for the neighbor side and CN operator ID. So let's look into this command, S1 interface and X2 interface. So I'm going to list the S1 interface first. So in some cases, for this command is display S1 interface. So this is the configuration of S1 interface. So for S1 interface, you can see this is my interface ID 0, my bearer ID 0 I configured earlier, and CN operator 0. My release is 8. This is a manual configuration, and my status, when you display, you can check the status is normal. And this is the served PLMN info, and we have the served gummy, which will also give you the STMC value, the temporary ID value. And next, we're going to move into X2 interface, display X2 interface. So if there is a neighbor side, you will see a configuration here. So this one is empty, so probably there is no second eNodeB added over here for the neighbor. So next, we're gonna add the application type of the IP path. So an eNodeB path must be configured. If it's not configured, then you will have a problem whereby UEs may not able to access to the network if you don't configure this. X2 user plane handover may fail, and no alarm will be reported when an IP path is faulty. So this command is very important for link mode. So eNodeB path, you will add the IP path, bind it with the S1 interface and the application type. So let's look into this command. So list eNodeB path. So for list eNodeB path, so they have configured this with the path ID, application type, S1 interface is 0, and there is no X2 interface ID, so it's null. So this is an example of the configuration. Next, we move into endpoint mode. So how to add an STP parameter template. So STP parameter template basically will be quoted by the STP host automatically, and it also indicates for the switch back flag. When you enable it, it indicates to switch back to primary path upon restoration of the primary path. If the primary path is unavailable, the STP link will switch to the secondary path. So that is the meaning of switch back flag. So let's look into this command if you're using a endpoint mode. If you're not using an endpoint mode, probably even though it's configured, it doesn't make any difference. So we go into STP template. Usually by default, it will be configured. By default, it will be configured because we do have an STP link. So by default, it will be automatically configured. So let's look into the STP host. So STP host, it indicates the ID. So first local IP is referring to your eNodeB IP, local port number, and STP parameter template ID that we have created earlier. So this port number will be used for automatic setup of the STP link. So let's see whether we have this command in our current configuration. So for this particular site, there is no STP host. So let's switch to the previous one. So both the base station are using old model. So we do, they are using link mode. So there is no endpoint mode for this part. So let's look into the endpoint mode, STP peer. So STP peer belongs to the MME IP. So this is MME IP and we will have to add the port number. So this one is auto mode. So auto mode, that means the signaling will be automatically added once the cell has been configured. So since if it's not endpoint mode, then probably we can disregard this command, but for link mode, we are not using this. So this is only for endpoint mode only. So add STP peer. So we can check whether we are using this command or not. Most likely no, because we are using the link mode. But this is the command that you can check out from your own network to see whether you're using link mode or endpoint mode. So when you list the STP peer, if no results found, that means it's not using endpoint mode. Q&A session, an eNodeB path MO must be configured. If it's not configured, then UEs may not be able to access to the network. Yes or no? Yes, this statement is true. So the summary of this section, eNodeB transport data, is that we have learned about transport and application layer configuration, transport and application layer data. Link mode, we learned on how to configure control plane link, how to add a control plane bearer, how to configure user plane path, how to add S1 X2 interface, how to add the application type of the IP path, how to add an STP parameter template, how to add an STP host, and last but not least, we learn on how to add an STP peer. That's all from me. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the session. Bye.